No, 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 no. He said, yeah, I want you to cash out. No, 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 no. He said, I'll bring your check by. Went back to his office, wrote a check, brought it back over to Rick's office, so he said, you're out. Rick Brown told me this personally. He then took that check and went to the bank and borrowed another, I think it was $50,000 with it, and went and found somebody else who was putting together a partnership to invest in S&H. See, S&H Oil would only take investments at minimum of like $50,000, $60,000. They wanted people to have some money. So he went and borrowed more money, put it all in there, and then one December, the SEC showed up in his office. They got word he was selling. He wasn't registered. They closed him down, and he ended up going to prison. We don't know where the money went. We don't have no idea. That one scam cost us the Central Florida, Winter Haven area more money than the worst freeze that's ever hit the state of Florida. Why? We even had the loan department of a bank invest in it. Why? Because they simply believed it. He was a charming personality. You know, a good guy. I have this debate. Yeah, is that? My English is terrible. My grammar is terrible, so I don't know. Is ethics or are ethics? Anyway, bottom line is, whichever way it is, can you teach ethics, or is ethics something you either have or you don't have? We can sensitize you to the situation, but you know what? If you're just bound and determined you're going to do what you want to do, there's not any amount of classroom, any amount of books, grades, or anything else going to change you. But if you just sensitize it to these are real life areas that you just will get, and there will be all kinds of very good, valid, justifiable reasons to do what you know shouldn't be done. And that's when you better run. We had another one in the church. This time it wasn't the preacher, it was the minister of music, who had traveled for years and was song evangelist. Now this is before your time. I know you can't imagine, but believe it or not, there was a day when nobody had computers. Okay? And when they first came out with, well, you do understand, computers started off on a binary system. And it was either a whole or solid. And the computers would run off of cards. And it had a hole punched in it, or it didn't have a hole punched in it. They taught us to count in school on the binary. Do they teach the binary system anymore? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 2 and 1's 3. There's 2 squared, that's 4. This is 5, this is 6, that's 7, that's 8. That's what computers were based on. Well, when computers first started coming out, everybody wanted a computer, but nobody could afford to have one. Number one, you didn't have a big enough room in your house to put one. But number two, they were too expensive. So these guys came up with this great idea, and they called it bits and bytes. And here's what they do. They created this little club. Now, this is before your time too. At one point in time in our country, we had a real problem with Arthur Murray dance studios. Now it's, and I don't want to use a name because I don't know if they're valid or not, which one's good or which one's not, but now you have certain gyms where you go and you pay a monthly registry, a monthly contract, or a contract and you pay a monthly fee, and you can go in and use their stuff. And what happens if you go there one day and they've closed up and moved out of town? Congratulations, you have a nice receipt to put on your wall, but you don't have any gym to go work out in. Well, Arthur Murray dance studios are the same way. They come into town, they get all these people to pay and come take dancing lessons, and all go there and dance, and then they show up one night for the dance, and Arthur Murray has moved on someplace else, and they're stuck with no money and no dancing rights. Okay? idea was, we will form these businesses where people can come into our little storefront and use our computer. They'll pay a monthly membership fee, come in and use our computer, and if the man has a business, he can put his payroll on it and do his payroll. And if he brings his kids with him, they can play computer games. And we'll have mentors in there to give advice on how to use a computer. And while you're there, we're going to sell you food. That's where Bits and Bytes come from. We'll have food available, and you can buy soft drinks, and you can buy snacks and all, so while you're working on the computer. And what happens is you pay X number of dollars a month, and you get so many hours a week worth of computer time, and you buy the food while you're in there. And if you don't join the club, you can come in, just pay an hourly fee to use it. And it sounds like a great idea. So you buy stock in Bits and Bytes, you become a shareholder, and what happens is, as they raise the money from selling the stock, they build the building and get the computers, then they have people selling memberships, and then all the profits that are made, as a shareholder, you're going to get a return on your dividends. Sounds like a great idea. Except it didn't work. What happened? Everybody's got a computer now, they carry it in their pocket. This man was involved in this, man in the church, everybody loved him. We had all these people buying stock in Bits and Bytes. They never opened the first store. They left town. And all these folks lost their money. Why did they buy stock? Sound like a good idea. And it was somebody that they trusted. Tell them that's what we ought to do. You're going to get a job working in the financial side of a business. One of the areas that I've found from my working on audit committees that's very, very important is that every business have a very tight, aggressive whistleblower policy. You familiar with whistleblower policies? The best whistleblower policies give the employees the opportunity to make the report to somebody outside the organization. That costs a little money. But that's the best one. Because that way, you're guaranteed. Now, where do I see, in my profession, where do I see this coming in? I see it when the employee makes the report and then gets fired. I had a case down in Naples, Florida. It was a car dealer. And the man who was doing the finance work, you know, the guy that does all the paperwork for the financing and the titles and all that stuff. Title, finance, insurance, I don't know what they call it. They have an acronym for it. Anyway, he does the title, finance, and insurance business. And one night he drove a car home, company car, business car, brought it back. The next day, a salesman brought him the paperwork in. They were going to sell the car. He suspected, he had long suspected, and now he had proof that his business was in, his company was doing something, and they had a word for it in the industry, and I forget what the word was. But what they would do is, this car, to finance it, the finance company only wants to loan 80%, 90%. So, if you say, this is the car, a 2011 Ford Fusion, well, that's going to be worth $15,000, so we'll loan 12 on it. Oh, but it's got power windows, it's got the super deluxe radio system, it's got special tires, it's got a automatic sunroof, it's got all these extras. Oh, well, that's not worth $15,000. Now that's worth $18,000, so we'll loan $15,000 on it. So what the dealer would do is he would take the car, fill out the paperwork, and add extras that weren't really there, misleading the lender. So the lender would loan more money, because when the lender would loan the full 15, the customer could buy it. If he's only going to loan 12 out of 15, the customer didn't have $3,000 to pay. So you exaggerate the value of the car to get the lender to loan more money, and guess what? If the buyer walks in there and has to come up with any money at all, he just walks out and leaves. He can't afford it. Well, this guy saw they were defrauding the lender. He also saw several other things going on. So he calls the home office. This is one business that's owned by, one car lot that's owned by a business in Kentucky that owns several car lots. He called the main boss and complained. And they sent somebody down. They sent their corporate lawyer down. And they came down and looked at things, and they said, well, you just need to let things settle down. We'll take care of it. We'll do an investigation. Well, they came back and said, we investigated. We can't find any proof of it. He said, I can go into that file room in there and get you the files and prove what I'm saying is true. They said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Next morning, he walked in. They called him in, and they fired him. They fired him. They had the local manager testify that he got a call the night before from the big boss in Kentucky that said, fire that so-and-so, he's a troublemaker, we can't use it any longer. And so he sued under the whistleblower statute. Trial court found that they didn't violate the whistleblower statute. I said we did, and since I was on the appellate court, I won. But it's important that you have an effective whistleblower policy, so your employees, because that's what it takes. It takes lots of eyes in a setting, and people need to understand they have an. Do you realize one of the biggest ethical violations is not necessarily you doing something wrong, but you see him doing something wrong, and you sitting there saying nothing about it? That's an ethical violation. That's the problem. Oh, but he's married to the boss's daughter. I can't say anything. My goodness. Your conscience knows what's right. There are all kinds of reasons that you can come up with, but it all comes down to the end. Well, I've gone on a lot. Let me take some questions. Maybe you have some questions.
Well, I want to know, did that preacher, the first story, did he lose his license?
No.
In the first story?
He did not. I tell you what happened. I proposed, he agreed. I went to the district advisory board and asked them to name the three, and the rest of the district advisory board said, no, we don't want to do that. And they backed off and did not, and he never lost his license. He did, when we changed DSs, the new DS did come in and make him pay back the money that he had skimmed off the excess profit. But he did not lose his license. It's and he really is a good man. He was a good friend of mine. In fact, years later, we were still good friends. The day he died, we were good friends. His daughter and son-in-law are some of my best friends. He really did not see that he was doing anything wrong. You say, how can that be? Well, welcome to Human Nature 101. We see what we want to see. Questions? Comments? Reaction? I saw a few the whistleblower case. I saw a few white-collar crime cases in the court system. Not that many, but now, of course, we have problems in the court system with ethics.
No, come on.
You can't believe that. Yeah. In fact, I'm just finishing a little book on the Supreme Court of Florida back from 1965 to 1975. At one time in Florida, out of 7 Supreme Court justices, we had 2 under indictment. One of them being had proceedings against him for competency, and one of them had a warrant for his arrest. He was actually on the lam and ran, and the day he died, he was still on the lam, running on an outstanding warrant for his arrest.
What did he do?
Drugs, smuggling drugs. The other ones under indictment were there for bribery, selling influence.
You've ever been offered money?
No, never been offered money. I have a cousin that refers to me as the best judge money can buy, but I have had a lot of pressure put on me. Had a case one time where a kid from Winter Haven my hometown, he pled straight up before me. If I'd known it was going to be this way, I would not have taken the case. It's a DUI homicide. His dad was a very influential man in a car dealer in Winter Haven, and Mom and Dad were gone for the weekend. He had Mom's Corvette out riding around, picked up his best friend, went by the house, had a few drinks, and went out racing around, and ended up hitting a tree, or hitting a concrete light pole, killed the best friend, so they charged him with DUI homicide. He walked in and pled straight up in front of me, which means no deal at all. The state had offered him a deal of 6 months in the county jail. He turned that down. His lawyer really thought he was going to talk me into no jail at all. I've been a public defender. Of course I'm not going to put anybody in jail, right? So after I took the plea, we had a sentencing hearing. And at the sentencing hearing, they brought in, now you have to understand, when I was in Winter Haven, on the city commission, the mayor, vice president of the Chamber of Commerce, was involved in every activity around Winter Haven, okay? So they bring in the president of the Chamber of Commerce, they bring in a couple of Winter Haven police officers. I taught schools, I knew all the school teachers. They brought in 2 or 3 school teachers from the public school, from the high school, all telling me what a good kid this was and why this kid shouldn't go to prison. And I mean, real pressure, real. Had people calling me, you know, tried to tell him I couldn't talk to him. And I ended up giving the kid 3 years in prison. Now, I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. I gave him 3 years in prison. Back then, you didn't serve but about less than 50% of your time. He was out in a little over a year. He was out. And then about 6 months later, he was involved in another one-car accident. DUI, hit a tree, killed himself. So he never learned his lesson. I like to think my sentencing were such that it deterred somebody from doing it again. It didn't him. But the reason I felt like I had to give him prison time was because I knew I had all the other high school kids in Winter Haven watching to see what I was going to do with him. So I had to send a message. But I felt a lot of, and in fact, it was so bad. After that, a good friend of mine, who was the CEO for the Chamber of Commerce, very good friend of mine, she was introducing me to somebody, and she says, and this is Judge Davis, whom I used to have a lot of respect for. I mean, the city, so there's pressure. You can't get away from it. That's life. But you're going to be in the very peculiar position when you're handling other people's monies. And there's going to be pressures on you to do things. And the question is, do you do what's efficient, effective, or do what's right? And if you have to start coming up with reasons to justify why you're doing what you're doing, you better think twice. If somebody says everybody does it, that's a sure signal you're on thin ice. If somebody says nobody will know about it, that's a sure signal you're on thin ice. But those are the kinds of things that ethical dilemmas, ethical situations. But remember, the truth will set you free. I heard that somewhere.
That's a good word to end on. I appreciate it, Judge. Thank you so much.
Okay.